So Aron, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
So I just left a large pharmacy retailer that is quickly becoming a health services company. So if I met you here under different context, I will probably cover some of what's happening there too, because AI is affecting everything, obviously. What I'm doing next is actually going back to really what I love best, which is media. And I loved everything Shelley said before about what's going to be working and how search is going to be changing. I just think it's going to be a totally different ballgame going forward. I have a slightly more optimistic view, I think, which is to say that Google and all the big search players have always sought relevance, and so whether they'll fix what they've already built or they'll just pull back some of the things that obviously aren't working. That's going to be a big aspect of what I'm doing next. And so this is something I've done quite a few times. Like I said, I just did it for a big pharmacy retailer owning multiple content programs, some that were written editorial, some that were both video and podcasting. In my previous role before the pandemic, I did this for 3 big tech companies. So Google, IBM, and SAP. And then before that, I was at Vox with a V, Vox Media for a while, and was on a team that got to do a lot of that sort of what are the publishing best practices. So what I'm doing next, if nobody minds me spitting out a big plug here, it's going to be called Supercool. Go to getsuper.cool. And it's based on the idea that so much of the media coverage on sustainability, on climate change, is just really unspeakably depressing, right? We're heading in a bad direction, and there's just nothing inspiring about that message. And so how do you change the conversation into something that's more about solutions? And there's solutions everywhere, right? There's a geothermal system that's running under Boise. How it wound up in Boise, how they became an incredibly innovative city is really interesting, and they did it in the 70s during the oil crisis as a way to save money. But geothermal powers hundreds of buildings in Boise. So that's the kind of thing that we'll be covering. It'll be a newsletter, it'll be a podcast, and also it'll be a YouTube channel to start.
It sounds very cool. Well, you kind of just inspired a thought that, wouldn't it be awesome if AI could help us turn rancorous, conversation into things that maybe draw us together, even if we're coming from different points of view, bring us together and make the conversation more positive and more focused on, positive outcomes and solutions, like you say, as opposed to just divide us. But that's a big ask, I guess. So when we were doing the prep for this, we were you've got I like your attitude. Being a technology guy myself, you're like, okay, here's what I'm actually using to get stuff done. I want to talk practical. There's been plenty of like quasi TED Talk discussions about AI that are kind of in the clouds, pun intended, I guess. But what do you see in terms of the everyday tools that you're helping, even in your previous role? What were you using? What was working? What do you think has a lot of promise? Just kind of riff a little bit on, what's working, what's maybe an empty promise, isn't ready for prime time, or didn't work out as well. What have you learned?
Yeah, so I would encourage everybody here to play with as many of these tools as you can, right? There's really only one way to figure out what's going to work for you. We brought in my previous role, what I thought was a very good tool for editorial written content. It incorporated a lot of the obvious SEO needs, keyword research, all that fun stuff. We trained it on our brand, and obviously trained it on a lot of the corrections that are common that we would get back from our legal team. And when you're talking about people's health, you can't make glue on pizza kind of mistakes, right? You just can't do those things, right? I mean, as bad as it would be to mess up somebody's financial portfolio, it's still not the consequences to someone's health are just very, very unforgiving, right? And so, that was a Writer AI. It was a really strong tool. I'm not here to plug. I don't have any financial interest in any of these players other than to say these are some of the things that I've tried and I really like. Video AI, I think, is excellent for video editing. Jasper and Predis AI are both really good for social. Where I think we're still sort of falling short is in the reporting piece, right? Like I remember whenever it was, like a year and change ago, when ChatGPT just first became part of our language, and I remember just very, like, just candidly being like, I don't need ChatGPT. I want TaskGPT. Like, I spend so much time copying and pasting data from one source into another, and everybody will tell you that they can build you one dashboard. It's just very rare that you find those kinds of solutions. And so I still think that's where a lot of the early wins are going to come. How do I pull everything I already have together? How do I make those things actually do the cartwheels that I still have to do manually, or as I'm copying and pasting things into Excel or into a Google Sheet or whatever people are using. But just pulling in everything from disparate sources, I still think is I mean, how much time would it save you to have a tool that really did that effectively, did it the right way, and then took all that information from the reporting itself and put it into the deck that you have to then send up the chain to make sure your budget is secure for next year, right? I mean, there's just a lot of really practical AI uses that I think are sort of here and being improved very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. There's I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's of course, I'm a gadget guy, techno geek, but there's a company out there. There's a couple of companies, but Human AI and Rabbit.ai. Rabbit's got this little device, and the device is really cool in and of itself, in that it doesn't replace your phone, although I think it easily could maybe one day, but I think the more likelihood is that the iPhone and Samsung just incorporate aspects of this thing into their tech. But I think the really interesting impact from a technology perspective and a user engagement perspective, not just technology for technology's sake, but how do we interact with a computer? Like, I'm old enough, I literally remember like learning how to use a mouse for the first time, right? Mm-hmm. And like, wow, that's huge. And my kids, of course, they're born, and it's like, they're just like, it's just natural. They're digital natives, right? So, but when I see things like Rabbit, and the cool thing about what I thought was pretty inspiring about what they're doing is the hardware. It's designed by teenage engineering, so it's just a rock solid piece of design. I don't care if the thing's a piece of crap. I'm going to put it in my office because it looks cool. But what I think is most interesting is he's talking in his keynote speech about this large action model. Like, AI has been all about large language models. I want to learn. I want to teach this model. I want to ask it questions in a conversational way and get answers, right? Or I want to have this crazy duck picture created, right? That's what it's been about. With the large action model, what Rabbit is pioneering, whether they'll succeed or not, I don't know. But I think it's always good to look at the pioneers to see what's the future. And from a company's, we develop like mobile apps, right? So interfacing, the way we interface an app, what we think of when we think of an app is that little square dot on our phones, and we hit it and it does a thing, right? A large action model, and what Rabbit is attempting is that I want to actually have something happen. Like, I don't want you to just go build me an itinerary for my trip to Rome. I want you to actually book it. I want you to give me here are the hotel recommendations, ask me if I want to actually use, but literally I want you to book the trip and have the Uber come pick me up, right? And so the vision is phenomenal in terms of the potential of it. The execution, I think it was, the device itself was largely panned right after the launch event here at JFK Airport. about a month ago, but I'm still waiting for my device. I'm going to see how it works. But you can now teach it. It will learn how to use apps, whether it's web apps, whether it's apps on the phone. It will learn how to interface with an app. You can teach it how to use the apps you use, and then all of a sudden you're completely abstracted from the actual app itself. You're just talking to an assistant, and it's actually doing stuff for you. And we see a lot of promise in that, in terms of where where the actual the entire paradigm for what an app actually is changing over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the immediate impact of AI for me as someone who works to create content of a lot of different forms is it just eliminated the blank page, right? Like everyone knows that feeling. I have a general idea of what I want to convey. I know what my brand messaging is, but where do I start? How do I, so you can punch what you need into the AI, but that's we've all seen that now. We've all played with it enough now to know what prompts work for us, and hopefully we're starting to train some of our own models to give us things that are more relevant right out of the gates, right? Or at least more on brand. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the generative images I've seen, although I've seen entire campaigns delivered by Midjourney, and I'm sure they perform just fine. And product lines too, right? That's an old publisher's trick, right? You don't create the published product until you've pre-sold quite a bit of it, and you can test a lot of different things. There's people in this room who I know are really, really strong media buyers and creators of ads, who can help you test infinite variations on taglines, on copy, on images, and that's hugely valuable. Like we've all been trained on the concept of deliver the right message to the right person at the right time, and I think we're getting a lot closer to that. But I don't necessarily think, other than, oh, there's an urgent need, I'm directly searching for this stuff. I don't know that that's going to be a giant leap forward, right? There will be gains on efficiency in terms of your ad buys, but I don't really think as like brand innovators, that's going to be what moves us forward into some new future. It'll help, and it's great, and it's really, really valuable software. And if you're not using it already, you should talk to the people here at Brand Innovators to connect you to people who can help you do that better. But as you start to get more experience, and if you've ever started your own company, you very quickly find out like every problem is your problem, and you start to think about workflows in a totally different way, right? And so what you're talking about is very similar to what I'm saying in terms of like the things that are just repetition. I want to get rid of those things, right? I want to remove those from my workflows, and for our younger employees who wind up doing a lot of that work, it's not terribly interesting work a lot of the time. So there's real value in some of it, but I think what the AI ultimately is going to do so much better than any of us is pick up on the nuances in the data, right? So I spoke to someone in my previous role, guy named Richard Kerr. He was at Pepsi for a long time. He did some amazing things in other places, and he was really like the best AI person that I know. If I have questions, I can get in touch with him, and he has solved billion-dollar problems for big brands and big companies, and he's been the machine learning guy before he was the AI guy, and so much of what he will tell new clients is really like more about data security, right? Especially in healthcare and finance and those worlds, right? Where there have been data breaches where people are talking to an AI chat bot and they get sensitive data out of a company through a chat bot. Like, so there's even workflow security issues that need to be accounted for with AI, right? Things that just probably no one's in charge of safeguarding that stuff yet or right now. And you're going to start seeing a lot more chief AI officers for that reason, I think. So, this stuff will continue to be a part of our workflows, but the workflow stuff to me, the nuanced approach to data is really interesting. But, what are we then going to do with all that time, right? I mean, that's, as marketers, I hope we're looking to be increasingly creative with that additional time. It's not always the case, but it can be, and then what, right? Once we've taken ourselves out of the really sort of boring and repetitive aspects of our jobs, where do we go?
Yeah, I think your initial comment about the old saying, it's always easier to edit than to create. I mean, to me, that's the low hanging fruit, right? It's just getting through that writer's block. I have to write a fair amount, whether it's an email or whether it's a proposal. There's a fair amount of work that has to be done, and there's like, okay, there's like the rocket science, SpaceX type AI, which is really fun to look at, right, and to experiment with. But then there's, okay, I can actually get shit done more efficiently, more effectively, and doesn't matter that I didn't pay that good of attention in my English classes in college, and Chat GPT will like just got my back. But when it comes to other things like using GPT-4 as example to give me a business graphic that's a pyramid with 3 tiers that kind of shows this this customer ICP split like this. It was a dumpster fire. I mean, that's literally a week ago. So there's a lot of work to do to even do just kind of like the basics. And it wasn't. I mean, I take responsibility. I'm sure some of it was my prompting, and I have to get smarter. I think it was Michelle Froh yesterday with ETS was talking about like if we want to get more out of AI, we have to get smarter. Like we have to get smarter in terms of what we expect out of it and how to prompt it properly. But but I see it really. It's taken a lot of, especially when you're a small organization, you don't have like a floor of a building with people to do a certain task, and you got to kind of you're doing it yourself. I totally get it, and it has been a game changer for the more simple things.
Yeah, you hit on a few things there. So one like good trick, let's call it good tactical thing that you can employ is if you are in the content world and you want to improve SEO, don't use ChatGPT to ask this question, but go to the Google product and ask it, why does X, or what is, successful about X page versus my own Y page. And, you can get the bot to answer some questions for you pretty quickly, right? Like you can prompt it to get that really basic data out of the way. But probably way more interesting and something that you just hit on, and certainly something that Shelley was talking a lot about, is I actually think the quality becomes increasingly important, right? Like the only thing that's going to help content stand out is a great voice, a really smart, creative, original point of view, because almost nothing else is going to do that, right? If 95%, or maybe Shelley would tell me it's a lot higher, of that content that's going to come up as I'm searching or just sort of clicking around is going to be the same stuff I'm seeing over and over again. I mean, we had bot farms forever, right? I mean, so that's not the stuff that's going to be really helpful. I was an advisor to a company, early AI company that was purchased by Forbes. It was called QAI. And they did a lot of really original things, but one of the incredibly smart things that they did early on was in their approach to how they scrape the data. So they had built 7 neural networks. They were training each one a little differently, and a handful of those were always trained on, like, because they were bought by Forbes, what internal data that you can't get any other way. Like, what are the articles that are really resonating with people? Like, not just clicks, but where people are spending a lot of time leaving that tab open, coming back to it, those kinds of things where it's like, and you're starting to see these deals now. My old company at Vox, who with you're thinking about The Verge, you're thinking about Eater, obviously Vox.com. They own New York Mag now. Like they are they just did a deal, right? Fox just did a deal too. You're going to see better and better sources to train these models, and I don't know where that goes either, but it's a really interesting question. And I think very quickly, what a lot of the LLMs, like the Pinecones of the world and others, are figuring out is if you don't feed it superior quality content, you're not going to get great outputs, right? I mean, it's the same stuff we've always known about every technology. I don't know when like medium-sized data became big data, right? But a lot of that is just marketing speak, and I feel like there's so much of that going on in AI right now, and that's why I say play with these tools, use them as much as you can, even if it sort of slows you down in your day to day. You at some point will get over a hump and it will make you more efficient, and you'll just figure out what works for you. It's why we brought the solution in my previous role that we did. It wasn't because we necessarily thought it was the best writer, AI content creator, but we brought it in because it actually fit the workflow of how that company created content on a daily basis, right? For things like press releases and things that mattered, right? Things that affected the stock price of the company, things that affected people's health. Like it just fit the workflow. And in a place where the tech stack is maybe not as high as it is in the kinds of tech companies you're talking about, or even as high as it may have been at Vox, you have to make those decisions, right? Like you have to say, all right, these are people who are not necessarily going to learn a ton of new skills in the process. But if we give them something that's going to make them faster and better at what they're already doing, I mean, it doesn't take a lot to do that. So there are some really practical short-term wins like we were talking about before. And some of those are really just management decisions, right? I mean, like the way we source any tool.
Yeah, and I think there's a whole, whether it's an extension of the CISO's office, the info security team, but you're seeing, what we're seeing is a lot of centers of excellence, being stood up around AI. So you get a cross-functional team working on it, in all towards a common objective, hopefully. Especially for the larger organizations, and as a consultancy, we've actually helped companies back in the day put like American Express right here in town. We helped them build out their playbook for a mobile center of excellence. And having seen this movie before, mobile, mobile 15 years ago was very disruptive in the sense that it was driving a lot of shadow IT. People were going around and moving files outside of firewalls using tools like Box. And CIOs and CISOs, the security teams, really had to really step up their game and put in a level of governance that I think we personally see. What we're doing now is actually working with companies to help them build out their playbooks for an AI center of excellence, because there are so many common threads between mobile shadow IT and what we're seeing with AI. And a lot of it just comes down to making sure you've got good segmentation and controls around your data. And being a cybersecurity guy, it is one of the things I've done as well. Zero trust is a buzzword that's been around for a few years, and zero trust can be great, but it can also it runs counter to like customer experience a lot of times. So how do you strike the right balance between enforcement and enablement and engagement? So we're seeing a lot of opportunities there, and one of the practical ways we just I'll tell just a quick stories like this brand Innovators app that it's being launched by the team in Cannes. We got a call, or our CEO talked to Mark Sternberg about, I don't know, it was about 11 days before South by Southwest and the tentpole there, which we participated in. And they agreed to build an app. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. When is that going to be ready? When are we going to do that? We're aiming to hopefully launch at Cannes. Well, 10 days later, we actually launched a beta app at the South by conference, and we're able to talk about it. And it actually has a little even a little AI chatbot within it to say, okay, I'm here. I've got an interest in, like, there was a topic on NIL in college athletics. So I was just kind of asking different questions and just, yeah, I'm interested in this. Well, and it gave you recommendations of some of the breakout sessions, and at an event like South by and Cannes, those breakout sessions, it's not like this where you're in one room and everything's happening, sequentially. It's happening all over the place all at once. So the way we were able to kind of go from ideation to get something that was, I'd say, advanced proof of concept and actually into the App Store through test flight in a beta version, was that we actually leveraged we built our own large language model on-prem, not in the cloud. And, we've got a bunch of really good developers who created a process to go into our code libraries, our component libraries that we've built over the past 15 years that we maintain. There's like something you need. Every mobile app needs a login. Every mobile app needs like a user profile. There's common things that you need. So rather than taking, just the time just that would have taken the whole, like, at least 10 days to go just pull the basic components. And that's with really strong, experienced developers. We did it, and we created the core of the app literally in minutes with the right prompting. And it wasn't just like a chat bot. It's, JSON, smart people putting in smart information. But the app was literally generated. All the components of the app were generated in minutes, which the impact of that is it enables us to focus with our customers on the most important thing. Because if you're going to go and invest in a custom app versus just go with a white label platform, slap your logo in and your color palette in and call it a day, you've got to have some ROI. And what we find is that, okay, we're going to take the time and money you're going to invest in us and focus on your brand experience and building something that's true to your brand and how you're trying to engage with your customers, your fans, your shoppers, whatever they may be, and just put the investment there. And because the cutting of the code, so to speak, it's going to become, and it's already becoming, more and more of a commodity. And by the way, our code was much higher quality. We didn't have as many bugs to go fix because of human error in the code generation process. So that's a practical way that probably not a lot of brand marketers are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But if it can work for something like that and help us accelerate time to market for our customers, that's a real impact for us.
Yeah, I mean, what is time to market worth for a social media manager? There's so many examples, and this is going to be pervasive. Obviously, this technology is going to hit everything we know and do. As someone who just came from retail, I saw a lot of and there's so much conversation about retail media. The customers hate it. It can be done well, but when it's not done exceptionally well, and you're just pushing, it's like when ads follow you around the internet. People don't like it. There are entire product categories and new browsers being launched to help correct for these things, and that those are probably going to become increasingly common too, right? As people just get sick of it. So it's not going to be the ability to necessarily just create so much more stuff very soon. It's the quality really will be what helps things stand out, and it really will have a major impact ultimately on that ROI that you're talking about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And quality is going to become more important, authenticity more important. The rise of the machines. You got to take the bad with the good, I guess. But I'm embracing it. Of course, I'm an old tech nerd. So with the time we have left, which is 44 seconds, are there any questions either for a guy with brand marketing experience in retail or an old bald tech nerd like me from Gen X? Go, baby. Vito, bring us home, man.
Hey, well, thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Aron. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.